I walked into what my mom called a simple family meeting. But the door locked behind me. Papers were already signed. My name was the only one missing. They smiled and said it was about inheritance. But their eyes said control. When I refused to sign, the room changed, the lights dimmed, and the truth came out. What they planned next was not legal. And not loving. Stay till the end. 'Cause what happened after I said no still haunts me today. The dining room smelled like old wood and cold tea. My mother sat at the head of the table, hands folded, eyes too calm. The chairs were already filled when I arrived, every family member silent. No one smiled. The ceiling fan hummed, slow and uneven, scraping my nerves. My phone vibrated once in my pocket, then went still. My mother said my name softly, as if practicing control. She said this was a family meeting, nothing serious. The word meeting tightened my chest. I noticed a folder on the table, thick and worn at the edges. My uncle kept tapping his ring against a glass, click by click. The sound echoed louder than it should have. My aunt avoided my eyes, staring at the wall behind me. The air felt heavy like before a storm. My mother slid the folder toward me. The paper inside smelled like dust and ink. She said it was about the inheritance. My throat went dry instantly. I felt heat rise behind my ears. She explained how things should be shared, how family comes first. Her voice stayed smooth, rehearsed. I opened the folder with slow fingers. Legal pages stared back at me, highlighted in yellow. My name appeared again and again. So did words about transfer and consent. My pulse thudded in my ears. I asked why everyone was here. No one answered. The fan creaked overhead. My mother leaned forward and said this was for the good of everyone. She said I needed to sign. Said no. The word felt sharp in my mouth. The room changed instantly. My uncle stopped tapping. My aunt finally looked at me, eyes cold. My cousin shifted closer to the door. My mother sighed, slow and disappointed. She said I was being difficult. She said I owed the family. I felt the chair press hard against my back. The lights flickered once. My hands began to sweat onto the paper. I repeated no louder this time. My mother stood up. Her shadow stretched across the table and over the documents. She said I had misunderstood the situation. She said this was never a request. Something metallic scraped behind me. I heard a lock slide into place. My stomach dropped as I realized the door was closed. Everyone was standing now. Their faces looked unfamiliar, tight, almost eager. My mother reached for the folder again, and as she did, I noticed the second document beneath it, already signed by everyone else, dated for today, leaving space only for my name, and when I stepped back, heart pounding, I felt a hand grip my arm, fingers digging in, while my mother whispered that if I refused again, they would make sure the inheritance never reached me. And that was when I understood the meeting was not about money at all, but about control, and the room felt smaller as. Another hand touched my shoulder, and the lights dimmed just enough for me to hear my own breathing grow louder while my mother raised the pen and pressed it toward my chest, saying calmly that this was the last chance before they showed me what family really means when someone refuses to obey. The pen felt cold as it touched my shirt. My heart hammered so hard that my vision blurred. I smelled my mother's perfume, sweet and familiar, twisted into something sickening. I pulled my arm back, but the grip tightened. Fingers pressed into my skin, firm and deliberate. My uncle stepped closer, blocking the light from the window. The room grew darker, not from night, but from bodies closing in. I heard my own breath scrape in my throat. I said I would not sign. My voice shook, but the words stayed clear. My mother tilted her head, studying me like a problem to solve. She said stubbornness always ran in the family. She said stubborn people usually regret it. The chair behind me scraped as someone kicked it away. The sound made me flinch. The folder slid across the table again, slow and threatening. The pages fluttered slightly like nervous wings. I noticed my grandfather's signature at the bottom of one page. The sight sent a chill through my spine. He had trusted her. He had trusted all of them. My aunt cleared her throat, sharp and impatient. She said time was being wasted. She said things could get uncomfortable. The word uncomfortable echoed inside my head. Sweat trickled down my back. The air smelled stale, trapped, used too many times for arguments like this. My cousin shifted his weight, cracking his knuckles. The sound felt intentional. My mother placed the pen into my hand. Her grip closed around my fingers, guiding them. I felt my pulse jump beneath her touch. I yanked my hand free. The pen clattered onto the table. Everyone froze for a single breath. Then my uncle laughed softly. The laugh held no humor. He said I was making this harder than it needed to be. The ceiling fan rattled faster, as if reacting to the tension. My ears rang. I looked toward the window again. The curtains were drawn tight. No light escaped. My mother's smile returned, thin and controlled. She said this family built everything together. She said no one walks away with more than their share. I said the inheritance was left to me by law. My words sounded small in the heavy room. My aunt slammed her palm on the table. The sound cracked through the silence. She said laws change when families decide. My stomach twisted. I realized how planned this had been. The seating, papers, the locked door. My mother stepped closer, lowering her voice. She said I should think about my safety. She mentioned accidents. She mentioned misunderstandings. My chest tightened until it hurt. I tasted metal on my tongue. I stepped backward until my legs hit the table edge. Cold wood pressed against me. My cousin reached for the pen again. I slapped his hand away. The contact stung my palm. My mother's eyes hardened. She nodded once, barely noticeable. My uncle moved behind me. I felt his presence before I felt his hands. They landed on my shoulders, heavy and grounding. I struggled, but the grip held firm. The room spun slightly. My mother slid the paper into position. She smoothed it with care. She said she raised me better than this. She said she taught me obedience. The word hit harder than any touch. My throat burned. I said she taught me honesty. Her jaw tightened. The lights flickered again. The fan slowed, then sped up. My aunt whispered something I could not hear. My cousin stood near the door, watching. I wondered how long the lock would hold. I wondered if anyone outside could hear. My mother lifted the pen once more. She pressed it into my trembling fingers. Ink stained my skin. I shook my head. Said no again. My uncle squeezed my shoulders harder. Pain shot down my arms. My vision darkened at the edges. My mother leaned close enough that I could feel her breath. She said family loyalty mattered more than inheritance. She said I could sign now or lose everything later. I felt something shift inside me. Fear mixed with anger. The smell of dust and old paper made me nauseous. I planted my feet and pushed back with all my strength. The chair behind me tipped over. The crash echoed through the room. My uncle stumbled. The grip loosened for a moment. I twisted free and backed toward the wall. My heart pounded so loudly it drowned out their voices. My mother shouted my name. Her voice cracked for the first time. I pressed my back against the cold wall. My hands shook violently. The folder lay open on the table, waiting. The pen rested beside it, innocent and dangerous. My aunt moved toward me, slow and careful. She said there was no need for drama. She said calm people made better choices. I laughed once, sharp and shaky. The sound surprised even me. I said this was not a meeting. I said this was a trap. Silence fell hard. My mother straightened her posture. She said I should watch my words. She said I was still her child. The word child made my stomach clench. I felt smaller and older at the same time. My cousin reached for the light switch. The room dimmed further. Shadows stretched along the walls. My breath came fast and shallow. My mother picked up the folder again. She held it against her chest. She said I could leave if I wanted. She smiled while she said it. She gestured toward the locked door. My uncle pulled a key from his pocket. It dangled between his fingers. The metal glinted faintly. He said cooperation made things easier. My pulse raced. I realized they expected me to break. They had always expected that. I clenched my fists. I said I would never sign. The words felt heavier now but stronger. My mother's smile vanished completely. She nodded again, slower this time. She said then we would do this differently. The key turned slightly in my uncle's hand. The click sounded final. I swallowed hard. My legs felt weak but I stayed upright. The air pressed down on me. The meeting had become something else entirely. Something darker. Something that would not end quietly. My mother took a slow step forward. Her shoes made no sound on the carpet. That silence frightened me more than shouting. She said calm voices solved stubborn problems. My uncle rolled the key between his fingers again. Metal scraped against skin. The sound made my jaw tighten. My aunt moved to the side, blocking the hallway entrance. The walls felt closer than before. I noticed a faint crack in the ceiling, spreading like a vein. My breathing felt loud and wrong. I wiped my sweaty palms against my jeans. The stain from the pen still marked my skin. Ink soaked into the lines of my hand. Felt like a brand. My cousin leaned against the door, arms crossed. His eyes stayed fixed on me. No blinking. No expression. My mother spoke again, softer now. She said I was embarrassing her. She said neighbors might hear if things escalated. The thought sent a jolt through me. Hope flickered briefly. Then I remembered the thick walls. The drawn curtains. The locked door. My aunt sighed loudly. She said patience had limits. She said everyone had already agreed. She tapped the signed paper with one fingernail. The sound felt like a countdown. My chest tightened. I asked when they planned this. My voice echoed thinly. No one answered. My mother brushed invisible dust from the table. She said planning was part of being responsible. She said I should have learned that by now. I backed along the wall, inch by inch. Cold paint brushed my shoulder blades. The smell of old cleaning chemicals stung my nose. My uncle stepped closer again. I raised my hands instinctively. He stopped, smiling faintly. He said there was no need for force. His tone suggested the opposite. The ceiling fan sputtered. A faint burning smell drifted down. I wondered how long it had been running. Sweat dripped into my eyes. My vision blurred. My mother asked one last time if I would sign. Her voice carried a final edge. I shook my head. The motion made my neck ache. My aunt clicked her tongue. She said stubbornness ruined families. She said people disappeared over less money. The word disappeared lodged in my chest. Felt dizzy. The floor seemed to tilt. My cousin pushed off the door. The lock rattled as his weight shifted. He said we were wasting daylight. My mother turned to him sharply. He said not yet. Her command froze him in place. She looked back at me. Her eyes shone with something close to pride. Or possession. She said I always tested limits. She said this was the final test. She reached out and straightened my collar. Her fingers trembled slightly. That scared me more than her anger. She whispered that everything could go back to normal. The word normal felt foreign. I glanced at the papers again. The highlighted lines glowed under the dim light. I imagined my name scrawled at the bottom. I imagined regret settling into my bones. My heartbeat thundered. I shook my head again. My mother exhaled slowly. She stepped back. The space she created felt like a trap closing. My uncle moved to the light switch. The room darkened further. Only the lamp above the table remained on. Its yellow glow felt surgical. My aunt sat down deliberately. The chair creaked under her weight. She folded her hands like a judge. My cousin stood directly behind me now. I felt his breath near my ear. He smelled of coffee and impatience. My skin crawled. I pressed my back harder against the wall. There was nowhere left to go. My mother returned to her seat. She opened the folder again. She said we would try a different approach. She slid out another document. Thinner. Crisper. The paper looked newer. She pushed it toward the edge of the table. I leaned forward to read the heading. The words blurred before my eyes. Something about guardianship. Something about incapacity. My stomach dropped violently. I looked up at her. She avoided my gaze this time. She said stress made people unreliable. She said doctors understood that. My aunt nodded in agreement. She said signatures mattered less than witnesses. My heart raced faster than before. My hands began to shake uncontrollably. I said they were lying. My voice cracked. My mother looked tired suddenly. She said families protect themselves. She said outsiders never understand. The lamp flickered. Shadows jumped across the walls. The fan screeched briefly. Then it slowed to a crawl. The silence felt thick enough to touch. My cousin placed a hand on my shoulder. The weight made my knees weaken. I shrugged him off with effort. My legs trembled. I stayed standing. My mother asked if I felt overwhelmed. She asked if I needed help. Her tone sounded almost kind. I knew better. I clenched my jaw until it hurt. I said I wanted to leave. My uncle laughed quietly. He said leaving was complicated. He lifted the key again. The metal reflected the lamplight. My aunt said cooperation could shorten this. She said resistance only delayed the inevitable. My mouth felt dry as sand. I swallowed hard. I tried to steady my breathing. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. The technique barely helped. My mother leaned back in her chair. She crossed her legs calmly. She said we had time. She said she was patient. That was the most terrifying thing she said. Minutes stretched painfully. No one spoke. Every sound felt amplified. The hum of the lamp. The faint tick of a clock somewhere. My own pulse pounding. Sweat soaked the back of my shirt. My muscles ached from tension. My aunt checked her watch. She sighed again. She said enough. She stood abruptly. The chair scraped loudly. The noise made me jump. She said they would proceed without my consent. My mother raised a hand. She said not yet. She looked at me again, studying every inch. She said this was my final opportunity to choose family. The word choose twisted in my gut. I felt anger flare hot and sudden. I said family did not threaten. I said family did not lock doors. My voice echoed sharply. My cousin clenched his jaw. My uncle shifted closer. My aunt's eyes narrowed. My mother stared at me for a long moment. Then she smiled again. Low. Controlled. She said families did worse to protect legacies. She slid the pen back across the table. It stopped near the edge. Almost within reach. I stared at it. The room seemed to hold its breath. I did not move. My fingers curled into fists. My nails bit into my skin. Pain grounded me. I lifted my gaze to meet my mother's eyes. I said I would rather lose everything than give in. The words tasted like fear and freedom mixed together. Silence slammed into the room. My mother's smile faded inch by inch. Her eyes hardened completely. She nodded once more. This time there was no hesitation. She said, then we begin the other process. My aunt reached for her phone. My uncle stepped toward the door. My cousin moved closer behind me again. The lamp flickered violently. The shadows swallowed the corners of the room. My heart raced as I realized this was only the beginning. My aunt's phone lit up her face with a pale glow. Her thumb hovered over the screen. I heard the faint vibration of an incoming call before she even moved. She silenced it without looking. My uncle reached the door and tested the handle. The lock held firm. He nodded to my mother. That small gesture made my stomach turn. My cousin pressed closer again. His shadow merged with mine on the wall. I felt trapped inside it. My mother folded her hands on the table. She spoke carefully, like every word carried weight. She said this process would be unpleasant. She said it would be quicker if I stayed calm. I swallowed hard. My tongue felt thick. I asked what process meant. No one answered immediately. The clock ticked louder now. Each second felt deliberate. My aunt finally said evaluations took time. She said paperwork took patience. She said resistance created records. The word records echoed sharply. My chest tightened again. My mother stood and walked toward a cabinet in the corner. It creaked as she opened it. Inside were folders stacked neatly. Too neatly. She pulled one out and set it on the table. My name was written on the tab. Felt dizzy. My knees threatened to buckle. I forced myself to stay upright. My mother opened the folder. Photographs slid halfway out. Printed emails. Medical forms. I recognized my own handwriting on one page. A note I wrote years ago during a hard week. My throat closed. She said concern built over time. She said everyone worried about me. My aunt nodded quickly. My uncle said they tried to help. The words felt rehearsed. I realized how long this had been forming. Weeks, months, maybe longer. The fan rattled again overhead. A speck of dust fell onto the table. Landed on my name. My cousin whispered that things would be easier if I stopped fighting. His breath was warm and close. Shuddered. I told him to step back. He did not move. My mother lifted one photograph. Showed me outside my apartment late at night. I stared at it in disbelief. She said stress showed in patterns. She said professionals noticed these things. My heart slammed painfully. I asked how she got those pictures. She smiled faintly. She said families watched out for each other. The lamp buzzed. Its light flickered across the photographs. My hands shook violently now. I clenched them behind my back. My aunt pointed at a form. She said signatures could be obtained later. She said cooperation reduced complications. My uncle added that doctors trusted family statements. The words pressed down on me like weight. I realized they were building a cage with paper. Quiet. Legal. Almost invisible. My mother closed the folder softly. The sound felt final. She said she did not want to hurt me. She said this was protection. I laughed again, sharper than before. The sound cracked in the stale air. I said protection did not feel like this. My voice trembled but stayed loud. My cousin tightened his grip on my shoulder. Pain flared. I gasped and twisted away. This time I stumbled forward. My hands hit the table. The papers shifted. The pen rolled and fell to the floor. Made a dull thud. Everyone froze. I stared at the pen lying near my feet. Something sparked inside me. Not courage. Desperation. I kicked it under the table. The small act felt rebellious. My mother's eyes flashed. She said enough games. She motioned to my uncle. He reached for the key again. I watched his hand carefully. My aunt moved closer to the table edge. Her phone buzzed again. This time she answered. She turned slightly away. She spoke in a low voice. We are ready. Cold rushed through my veins. I asked who she was talking to. She ignored me. She ended the call and placed the phone down. The screen stayed lit for a moment. A calendar notification flashed briefly. Appointment. Today. My mother sat back down. She smoothed her skirt. She said transportation was arranged. She said I would feel better after rest. The room seemed to tilt again. I backed away from the table. My heel hit the fallen chair. I nearly fell. My cousin caught my arm. His grip was iron. I struggled. My heart pounded violently. I said let go. My voice rose higher than I expected. My mother winced slightly. She said noise would not help. She said calm behavior mattered. I tasted salt as tears threatened. I blinked them back fiercely. I refused to cry in front of them. My uncle unlocked the door. The click echoed louder than before. The door opened a few inches. A sliver of hallway light spilled in. Hope flared painfully. Then he stepped in front of it, blocking the way. My aunt gathered the folders. She stacked them carefully. She said documentation was complete. My mother stood again. She approached me slowly. She reached out and brushed my hair back. Her touch made my skin crawl. She said this would all make sense later. She said I would thank her one day. I shook my head violently. I said I would never forgive this. Her expression hardened. She said forgiveness was optional. Control was not. My cousin pulled me a step forward. I dug my heels into the carpet. The fibers burned against my skin. Fought to stay in place. My muscles screamed. My uncle closed the door again. The lock slid back into place. The sound crushed the last bit of hope. My aunt moved toward the hallway closet. She opened it. Inside hung coats and bags. She pulled out a folded blanket. My stomach lurched. I demanded to know what they were doing. No one answered. My mother nodded once more. She said proceed. The word echoed endlessly in my head. My cousin tightened his hold. My uncle stepped closer. The room seemed to shrink around me. The air felt thin. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I struggled harder now. Fear gave me strength. The table rattled as my elbow hit it. Papers slid to the floor. The lamp shook. Light danced wildly across the walls. My aunt dropped the blanket. It landed in a heap. My mother shouted my name sharply. Her voice cut through the chaos. I froze for a split second. That was all they needed. Hands closed around my arms again. Firm. Controlled. I screamed. The sound tore from my chest. It felt raw and desperate. My mother flinched. She shouted back for silence. She said neighbors would misunderstand. I screamed again anyway. My throat burned. My voice cracked. The sound filled the room. My uncle cursed under his breath. My cousin struggled to hold me steady. Kicked wildly. My foot connected with something solid. A sharp yelp followed. The grip loosened slightly. I twisted again. My shoulder burned with pain. I did not stop. I would not stop. My mother's face changed completely. Anger stripped away her calm. She looked furious and afraid. She shouted for them to hold me still. The room erupted into noise. Furniture scraped. Voices overlapped. My vision blurred with tears. I could not stop now. Through the chaos I heard something else. A distant sound. Muffled. Knock. I froze again. Everyone froze. The knock came again. Louder this time. Sharp against the door. My heart leaped painfully. My aunt whispered something frantic. My uncle cursed again. My mother straightened instantly. Her face smoothed into calm. She raised a finger for silence. The knock came a third time, followed by a voice. Muffled but clear enough. Someone asking if everything was all right. Hope surged violently inside me. I opened my mouth to scream again. My cousin clamped a hand over it. His palm tasted like sweat and fear. My eyes widened. I bit down hard. He cried out and pulled back. The knock turned into pounding. The voice grew louder. Demanding. Insistent. My mother backed toward the door. She forced a smile I could hear in her voice. She called out that everything was fine. That family disagreements happened. The pounding did not stop. My heart raced faster than ever. I struggled again. Every nerve screamed. This moment felt fragile. Like glass about to shatter. I did not know what would happen next. I only knew the meeting was no longer contained. The pounding grew heavier. It rattled the door frame. Dust drifted down from the top hinge. My mother placed her palm against the wood. She told the voice outside that everything was under control. Her tone sounded sweet and steady. Made my skin crawl. The voice answered again, closer now. Concern edged every word. My aunt whispered urgently that we needed to finish this. My uncle shook his head, eyes fixed on the door. My cousin tightened his grip on my arm again. Pain shot through my shoulder. I sucked in a sharp breath. The smell of sweat and old carpet filled my nose. The pounding stopped for a moment. Silence stretched painfully thin. My heart thudded so hard I thought they could hear it. Then the doorbell rang. Long. Insistent. The sound cut through the room like a blade. My mother flinched despite herself. She shot my aunt a warning look. My aunt clenched her jaw. She hissed that this was going wrong. The doorbell rang again. My cousin cursed softly. My uncle wiped his hands on his pants. The lock seemed louder now, heavier. My mother inhaled slowly. She told everyone to stay calm. She said panic ruined everything. I twisted my arm sharply. The grip loosened for a split second. I sucked in air and shouted. I shouted for help. My voice cracked, but it carried. My mother spun toward me. Her eyes burned with fury. She lunged forward and slapped her hand over my mouth. The smell of her perfume overwhelmed me. My head rang. My heart slammed violently. The doorbell stopped. A new sound replaced it. Metal scraping against metal. Someone was unlocking the door from the outside. My uncle's face drained of color. He shouted that this was impossible. My aunt backed away from the table. Papers slid off the edge and scattered. My cousin froze completely. My mother stared at the door in disbelief. The lock turned. Low. Deliberate. The door opened several inches. Light flooded the room. Fresh air rushed in. I inhaled deeply, desperate. A uniformed figure stepped into view. Then another. The room felt suddenly smaller. My mother forced a laugh. She said there had been a misunderstanding. Her voice trembled despite her effort. The first officer scanned the room carefully. His eyes paused on me. On my arm. On the red marks forming beneath my sleeve. The second officer frowned. He asked if everything was all right. No one answered quickly enough. I pulled free with sudden strength. I stumbled forward into the light. My legs shook violently. Gasped for air. Said no. The word came out hoarse and raw. I said everything was not all right. My mother reached for me instinctively. The officer stepped between us. He raised his hand calmly. My aunt started speaking at once. She said this was a private family matter. She said emotions had run high. The officer held up a finger. He asked me directly if I felt safe. My chest tightened painfully. Tears blurred my vision again. I shook my head slowly. The room went silent. The fan overhead squealed once more. My uncle cleared his throat nervously. He said this was unnecessary. The second officer looked at the scattered papers. At the blanket on the floor. At the overturned chair. His jaw tightened. He asked everyone to step back. My cousin hesitated. The officer repeated the command more firmly. My cousin stepped away from me. The space felt unreal. Like waking from a nightmare. My mother stood frozen. Her mouth opened slightly. No words came out. The first officer asked me if I needed medical attention. My hands shook uncontrollably. I hugged myself tightly. I said I just wanted to leave. My voice barely held together. The officer nodded. He told me that I could step outside. I moved toward the door slowly. Every step felt heavy. The hallway light felt blinding. Cool air brushed my face. Felt like freedom and fear combined. Behind me, voices rose in protest. My aunt argued loudly. My uncle demanded explanations. My mother called my name sharply. Her voice carried authority and panic. The officer blocked her path. He told her to stay where she was. I stepped fully into the hallway. My knees nearly buckled. Another officer appeared from the stairwell. He asked questions quickly. I struggled to answer between breaths. I told them about the meeting. About the papers. About the locked door. My words spilled out unevenly. Once they started, they would not stop. Felt exposed. Vulnerable. Relieved. Inside the apartment, voices grew louder. Arguments overlapped. Someone shouted my name again. The sound felt distant now. Like it belonged to another life. The officer placed a steady hand near my elbow. He guided me farther down the hallway. Each step away loosened the knot in my chest slightly. I glanced back once. The door stood open. The dining room looked smaller from here. Ordinary. Almost harmless. That terrified me. I wondered how many times this room had witnessed quiet threats. How many plans had been whispered there. The officer asked if I had somewhere safe to go. My mind raced. I realized how alone I felt. How deeply they had woven themselves into my life. I swallowed hard. I said I needed time. The officer nodded again. He said that could be arranged. Behind us, the argument escalated. My aunt's voice cracked. My uncle shouted about misunderstandings. My mother said my name softly again. The softness felt like a blade. I did not turn back this time. The hallway stretched long and unfamiliar. Each step carried me farther from the meeting, but not from its consequences. I knew this was not finished. I knew they would not let go easily. The inheritance was only part of it. Control was the real prize. And I had just challenged it. The officer guided me toward the stairwell. The concrete steps felt cold through the soles of my shoes. My legs trembled with every movement. The sounds from the apartment echoed behind us. Raised voices, angry explanations, sharp denials. Each sound made my shoulders tense. The stairwell smelled like dust and old paint. A flickering light buzzed overhead. I gripped the railing to steady myself. My fingers left damp marks on the metal. The officer asked me to slow my breathing. Tried. Air scraped in and out of my lungs unevenly. Another officer stood at the bottom of the stairs. He watched carefully, eyes alert. The hallway door above slammed shut. The sound made me flinch violently. My heart leaped into my throat. The officer beside me paused. He placed himself slightly in front of me. His presence felt like a fragile shield. I heard footsteps on the stairs behind us. Heavy. Fast. My pulse spiked again. The officer turned sharply. My mother's voice echoed down the stairwell. She sounded breathless. Urgent. She said there was been a misunderstanding. She said families argue sometimes. The words felt rehearsed even now. The officer raised his hand again. He told her to stop where she was. Her footsteps halted abruptly. The silence that followed felt heavy. I did not turn around. I focused on the chipped paint on the wall, on the faint crack running along the concrete. Anything but her voice. She said my name again, softer this time, almost pleading. My stomach twisted painfully. Felt the old pull, the habit of obedience, the urge to explain myself. I clenched my jaw hard. The officer guided me down another step, then another. Each step felt like breaking a rule. At the bottom, the second officer opened the building door. Night air rushed in. Cool, dark, real. I inhaled deeply. My chest burned but welcomed it. Streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. Police car idled nearby. Its lights were off, but the engine hummed steadily. The sound grounded me. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Some doors stood slightly open. Curiosity lingered in the air. Felt exposed. My clothes felt wrinkled and wrong. My skin still buzzed where hands had held me. The officer asked if I could walk to the car. I nodded slowly. My legs felt weak, but they moved. Each step away from the building eased the pressure in my chest slightly. Behind us, the building door opened again. Voices spilled out. My aunt's sharp tone cut through the night. My uncle argued loudly. Their words blurred together. I heard my mother last. She spoke calmly. Too calmly. She told someone that I was unwell, that I was confused, that stress had affected my judgment. The words made my hands shake again. The officer opened the car door for me. The interior smelled like vinyl and disinfectant. I slid into the back seat. The door closed with a solid thud. The sound felt final and safe at the same time. I leaned back against the seat. My head felt light. My temples throbbed. The officer asked if I was injured. I hesitated. I said my shoulder hurt. I said my arm hurt. I said everything hurt. He nodded and made a note. Another officer stood by the building entrance. He spoke quietly into his radio. The radio crackled softly in response. The sound made my stomach clench. I realized how serious this had become, how far it had gone. The car door opened again briefly. The officer handed me a bottle of water. My hands shook as I took it. I unscrewed the cap slowly. The water tasted sharp and clean. I drank greedily. Some of the tension eased. The officer asked me to tell him what happened from the beginning. I stared straight ahead. The street light flickered above us. I started speaking, slowly at first. I told him about the meeting, about the locked door, about the papers and the threats. My voice trembled, but it did not stop. Each sentence felt like removing a weight. The officer listened without interrupting. His expression stayed neutral but focused. I mentioned the inheritance, the signatures, the guardianship document. His jaw tightened slightly. He wrote more notes. I told him about the blanket, about the phone call, about the appointment. Saying it out loud made my skin crawl again. The officer asked if I felt my family planned to detain me against my will. The word detain echoed in my head. I nodded slowly. My throat felt tight. He nodded in return. He said that mattered. Behind us, the building door closed again. The argument inside seemed to fade. The night felt unusually quiet. Cars passed occasionally. Their headlights swept over the street. I felt small and exposed in the back seat. The officer asked if I had any identification with me. I patted my pockets. My wallet was still there. I handed it to him with trembling fingers. He examined it briefly. He handed it back gently. He asked where I lived. Gave my address. Saying it out loud felt strange, like claiming something for myself. He asked if I wanted to go home or somewhere else. My mind raced. Home suddenly felt fragile, predictable, possibly compromised. I imagined my family showing up there, waiting, watching. My stomach tightened again. I said I was not sure. He nodded. He said we could figure it out. The officer closed the notebook. He said there would be questions later. He said tonight was about safety. The word safety felt foreign but comforting. Another officer approached the car. He leaned down and spoke quietly. I could not hear every word. Caught pieces. Documents. Witness. Concern. The officer in the front seat glanced at me through the mirror. His eyes were steady. He asked if I felt afraid of going back inside that apartment. My chest tightened immediately. I shook my head quickly. Said yes. Very afraid. He nodded again. He said that was enough. He closed the door fully. The engine revved slightly. The car pulled away from the curb. The building slid out of view. My shoulders slumped as it disappeared. I stared out the window. Street lights blurred together. My reflection stared back faintly. I barely recognized myself. My eyes looked too wide, too alert. The officer asked if I wanted the heater on. I realized I was shivering. He nodded. Warm air filled the car. My muscles loosened slightly. My thoughts did not. I replayed the meeting in my head. Every word, every look, every moment of control. I wondered how close it had come to something worse. I wondered how long they would have kept me there. The officer said they would need to secure the documents. He said they would speak with everyone involved. I listened quietly. Part of me believed him. Part of me still expected my mother to appear somehow, to reclaim control. The car turned onto a wider road. Traffic picked up slightly. Life continued around us. That realization felt surreal. People laughed somewhere. Music played from another car. Normal sounds from a normal night. My body still felt locked in survival mode. The officer asked if I had anyone I trusted. The question landed heavily. I searched my mind. Names surfaced. Faded connections. Old friends. People I had drifted from under family pressure. The realization hurt. I said I needed to think. He nodded again. The car slowed at a red light. I watched it turn green. The movement felt symbolic. A direction I had not chosen but needed. The officer said they would help me contact someone. He said there were resources. He said I was not alone. The words felt unreal, comforting, fragile. I leaned my head back against the seat. Exhaustion crashed over me suddenly. My body ached deeply. My mind refused to rest. The car continued forward through the city. Every block carried me farther from the meeting, but closer to whatever came next. I did not know what that would be. I only knew the quiet control I had lived under was cracked, and cracks had a way of spreading. The car slowed near a quiet building with soft lights. The engine idled gently. The officer said this was a safe place for the night. His voice stayed calm and steady. I nodded slowly. My body felt heavy but my chest felt lighter. I stepped out of the car. Cool air wrapped around me again. No longer felt sharp. Felt clean. The building entrance glowed warmly. A door opened from the inside. A calm face greeted me. No questions yet. No pressure. Just space. I took one last look down the street. The city moved on without noticing. That felt strangely comforting. I realized something then. The meeting had failed. The trap had broken open. Their control had slipped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But enough. I crossed the threshold into the light. The door closed softly behind me. For the first time that night, the silence felt safe. My hands stopped shaking. My breathing slowed. I knew consequences would follow. Questions. Confrontations. Distance. But I also knew something else. I had chosen myself. The inheritance no longer mattered most. Freedom did. And as I stood there, finally alone, I understood that the hardest part was over. Because once control is seen clearly, it never fully works again.